Well, good morning, everybody. It's an early Saturday, and it's a big day for all of us as far as India's space program is concerned, because ISRO, the Indian Space Organization, the Space Research Organization, is going to do something which it doesn't normally do, which is why we're here early in the morning. Pallav Bagla, of course, with us as always. I tend not to discuss space unless Pallav is with me here in the studio. Pallav, ISRO wants a failure today in order for it to succeed. Hold that thought, because I know you have a lot to share, but what we are trying to do is, and we're going to be broadcasting all of this live, so rest assured we'll tell you when it happens, we'll tell you what you need to watch. No, we already know what they need to watch. They need to watch this, right? So ISRO will deliberately be making its rocket fail to simulate the operation of a crew escape system as part of 20 plus tests to be carried out as part of the Gaganyaan mission. It's all about Gaganyaan. What exactly is Gaganyaan? The goal is to put a crewed mission, an Indian crewed mission, into space. We are using the word crewed and not manned because eventually we expect there to be women astronauts as well. Second point, as Pallav knows all too well, they may not even be called astronauts. Will they be called Vyomnauts? We aren't entirely sure, but that's one possibility. For the moment, we'll use the word astronauts. All right. So today, we are seeing a really important test ahead of Gaganyaan. That will happen several months later, sometime next year. But that Gaganyaan mission, the crewed mission into space, needs to ensure that those on board the rocket in the crew module, in fact, you see the crew module over there, they need to be safe. So if there is a disastrous situation, if there is an in-flight emergency, that crew module needs to separate itself from the rocket using a very complex system as part of an abort maneuver, whereby it separates from the rocket, and despite the speeds that it is flying in, and we're looking at more than the speed of sound, perhaps upwards of Mach 1, right, 1.2, Mach 1.2, it needs to separate, it needs to position itself, be in the right orientation before a drogue parachute is opened up. That's a preliminary parachute, and subsequently 3 large parachutes, so that it can sail safely at a particular vertical velocity, right, not too fast, before it touches down in the surface of the Indian Ocean, essentially the Bay of Bengal. Now that's what we are talking about. You've got it full screen on your in front of you now. So look at the image first on the left. That's where it lifts off from at a certain stage, and we'll bring you more clear renditions of this later on. The crew module separates from the rocket itself. There are drogue parachutes, that's the initial set of parachutes, which open up to reduce its velocity, and that's a violent process. There's nothing peaceful about what happens over here before the main parachutes open up, and before the crew escape module lands in the ocean, and it floats over there as a result of, it's designed to float. It is attached to inflatable devices which come out of the crew escape module. It floats, and then it will be recovered by the Indian Navy. Now, another key part of team NDTV, my colleague Sam Daniel. Sam doesn't like Pallav to be in the studio. Sam prefers to be where the action is at. So he's at Sriharikota. Sam would have it no other way. But so Pallav, right now you're going to have to wait before I come to you, because I think we need to go to Sam first.
Yes.
Sam, what's happening around you? Is there a buzz, a sense of excitement? There usually is before any major ISRO launch. Tell us.
Well, Vishnu and Pallav, we come to you from outside the Satish Dhawan Space Center, and the first launch pad from where the test flight would lift off is around 4 to 5 kilometers from here, and the splash would happen around 10 kilometers on this side on the Bay of Bengal. There is so much of excitement, particularly after the successful lunar landing by Chandrayaan 3. And on the other side, along the gallery, you will have hundreds of people waiting to watch the liftoff live, including many children who have traveled from all across the country. And the expectation is, if this goes well, then it will be a kind of a prelude to the series of 20 tests altogether to pave way for Indian astronauts to travel on an Indian mission to reach the space and come back safe. And the whole mission would be just around for 8 minutes. And we understand there's no press briefing after that, but within a couple of hours, authorities say they'll be able to update on the recovery of the crew module that would be parachuted in the ocean and help us understand what went right or what went wrong, what lessons to be learned from that.
Pallav, why does India need to succeed in this test before Gaganyaan happens?
Well, it's all about happy landings. So if you have to have a happy landing, and in case there is an emergency on the launch pad or after liftoff in the ascent phase, then the crew which is in the crew module, which is the astronauts, and we can have up to 3 of them, they need to be safely taken out of the rocket and brought into safety. So the crew escape system is an integral part of any human space flight, and these are learnings which each country has to do. So India is doing on its own, because India would be the 4th country if it succeeds to do independently access space for humans on their own steam. So these are big learnings. It's one small step today, but towards a big goal, and the Prime Minister has said the big goal of 2040 for an Indian to be on the moon. So this is all heading in that direction.
2040 means we have to be working extremely fast. Just for the benefit of our viewers, there are no pilots or astronauts, today. It's a test system. Are there mannequins on board?
No, today it's an unpressurized crew module. There are no mannequins. There are systems which will measure the thrust and the velocity and how it's going to fall. But today there are no mannequins on the crew module.
Ravi Margasayam, a retired NASA scientist, also joins us. Thank you, Mr. Margasayam, for being with us. We keep saying this, and it sounds like a bit of a cliche, but it is true, isn't it? That when it comes to space, it's sort of crawl, walk, and run. As far as Gaganyaan is concerned, we are probably in the walk phase right now. A lot of the technologies have been developed, but they're being tested. Why is this test important?
Well, first, thank you for inviting me. Really, this is the second time I'm coming, and I'm really happy to contribute something about my 30 years of experience with working on the space shuttle, launching Kalpana Chawla, and launching the space shuttles. So, as we say in NASA, test what you fly, fly what you test. It's very, very important. And then, we trust the components, but we still have to verify them. So these are the 2 tenets, NASA lives by. And it's very important for us to understand how the systems work together. Independently, ISRO has done a lot of testing on the ground, but now it's a dynamic testing. And rockets by default, the proof of the pudding is in launching, basically. And I had an opportunity to work with NASA for 28 years and launch 100 space shuttles. And in my whole time, we never lost one during liftoff. Yes, landing, I lost one, but we still take the blame. But I think it's important that we go, as I said, crawl, walk, run, and then fly, basically. And that's what we are doing right now today, is to understand the system dynamics. Because as a vibroacoustics engineer, I'm for me, it's very, very important up to 90 seconds of the launch. Okay, first lift off, from getting off the pad and going up to 90. That's where max Q happens, basically, or maximum aerodynamic pressure on the rocket. And this is the critical time between 0 seconds at liftoff to 90 seconds. That's where things can go wrong. Why they go wrong? Because we generate a lot of acoustics. And this acoustics works as a load on the structure. And because there are hundreds of frequencies from almost 0.01 to, several thousand, we don't know which frequency is affecting which system. And that's what we are trying to do today, because statically we cannot do it, And that's the main reason we have to test what we fly what we test.
Pallav, just the process of separating the crew escape module from the rocket itself is difficult, right? It requires a certain thrusters to fire. It requires the body to be stabilized as well, the crew escape module.
Oh, sure. It is not an easy job because this whole thing is designed to fly into space and you're aborting it in between. So and the escape system is all powered using solid rocket motors. So this is very high velocity being generated, very high thrust being generated in a very short time. So it's going to cause immense amount of tension onto the crew module, onto the system, and ultimately it is a new rocket which is being tested. Completely new
We
new
are
animal.
talking about that. Yeah, it's a new rocket.
It's a new animal.
Yeah.
So there are many.
Is this rocket only for this test?
It is designed for this test, but subsequently to be used in all other tests which are to be done for Gaganyaan and other tests. But mainly it has been designed as a rocket system because you don't want to waste a full launch vehicle Mark III which cost upward of 400 crores for each test.
Right.
You want to use a smaller system which is lower cost.
Yeah.
That's why this new rocket system has been designed, which will be used for this and several other tests as we go on towards Gaganyaan, which is going to happen somewhere after 2024 in 2025.
Yeah. 2025, not 2024. We're looking at 2025.
ISRO is saying end of 2024,
Yeah, that's what I
but
thought.
that is if all these 20 tests happen back to back and all happen successfully, and all the other rockets in between, the PSLVs, the launch vehicle Mark IIIs, the GSLV Mark IIs, all succeed without fail. Only then can you expect. It's a tall
that's
task.
a key point, Pallav. If we don't clear a test, we don't go to the next one. We go back and we do it again till we get it fixed.
Absolutely.
And that's time consuming. Mr. Margasayam, you'd agree that, if there are problems which arise, then it's back to the engineering board. It's back to looking at what went wrong. That is a process that takes time. And then if there is a complex process of re-engineering that's involved, you don't exactly expect it to be fixed overnight. It could take months, right?
Yes, as you've seen, I had I didn't have the opportunity to work on Challenger accident, but I was definitely involved with Columbia accident when Kalpana Chawla, our own astronaut, Indian-born astronaut, perished in that thing. So what we are trying to say here is we learn more from one failure than 1,000 successes. Success doesn't help us at all because it masks the failure cause, root cause. And NASA looks at two causes. One is called the proximate cause. The other one is called the root cause. So people just do one analysis and be done. No, that's not true. So what happens with the proximate cause is always technical in nature, whereas the root cause is always human error. And because every single rocket endeavor is a human endeavor, we have more human errors involved in the system. So the idea is to make sure that we launch this rocket and understand the failures. And if it is very important, if there are failures, no problem at all. Actually, we can fix it. Yes, it will take time. But, where the important thing comes is where we understand what system fails. And most people don't do the root cause analysis. And that's where the problem comes. So I expect, if there is a problem, I'm not expecting any problem today, but if there is one, it is good because we want to catch it before we put a human being there. And luckily for me, my 100 flights for the space shuttle, all were human manned space flights. Each rocket had about 7 people. So I launched about 700 people to space. And it's a very dangerous business. When you just have no humans in there, it's a different business. But when you have humans, it is really it affects your heart. Even today I cry because of Kalpana.
No, I know that was a horrific tragedy, and of course, so many scientific and engineering learnings from that. Pallav, there's, this is the point which I think we need to talk about. We are talking about the crew module. Inside the crew module will be where our astronauts are seated. There are 4 grids. There is a crew module fairing. There is a high altitude escape motor, 4 of them in fact, a thrust transfer structure, a conical shroud, an LEM adapter, a conical shroud, a low altitude escape motor, various stages, a pitch motor, and a nose cone. And I've not even read out a few. So when the abort instruction is given, it's not just the crew module detaching. There are it's a sequence which involves multiple aspects of the rocket.
Sure. First, the rocket itself has to separate from the crew escape system. Then the crew escape system fires. And today, it is a much smaller rocket. Ultimately, we'll have the launch vehicle Mark III, which is weighing over 600 tons. And it has to separate from that. And both are rising into the atmosphere at a very high velocity. And they have to separate so that they don't collide with each other. There are complexities and there are complexities, but scientists at ISRO with whom I have spoken, they have said clearly they've worked hard making sure that these systems work, but then there is no option but to test them in live situations. So today's test is one of a series of tests, and this abort mission, they earlier did a pad abort mission, which was if the rocket fails at the launch pad itself. Today they are testing if it fails at about 17 kilometers above the launch pad.
Right.
So there are several tests which have to be done, and once all of them are qualified, only then can 1, 2 or 3 of our designated test pilots from the Indian Air Force can climb into the crew module. They are all trained, but the escape system has to work perfectly before any of the crew can be accommodated in the crew module. So these are very complex systems, and all have to be learnt individually by nations. So all the learnings have been done by ISRO, and this big test, which will happen at 8 o'clock, it's a 9-minute flight, and then recovery from the Bay of Bengal, all likely to happen. But there is a slight drizzle at Sriharikota. So they say liftoff should not be a problem. Recovery, there could be issues, but then there are no humans in the loop today. But the Indian Navy is all set for recovery.
What's the difference between the crew escape system and the crew module? The crew module, yeah. Is it one and the same?
No, the crew escape system is one system which sits above the launch, and it's one whole
structure.
And then within it encompassed is the crew module.
I see.
So the whole thing lifts off, separates, then beyond a point the crew module separates, goes away separately. So you'll have 3 things which will go down into the ocean today. One is the spent rocket stage, the other is the crew module, and at a third location would be the crew escape system.
Yeah.
And all have to be separated from each other sufficient distance so that they don't collide with each other in air. So these are very complex maneuvers which have to be undertaken autonomously by the rocket.
Let's have this graphic up full screen and talk a little bit about this because this is actually quite interesting. If we can have this particular graphic up, So this actually gives you a sequence of events, and this is important because the entire flight is 531.8 seconds.
Yeah, that's about 9 minutes, little less than 9 minutes.
A little less than 9 minutes. It goes up and it will fly to an altitude of 17 kilometers before the crew module and the crew escape system separate. It comes down to an altitude of 16.7 kilometers when the drogue parachute, that's the preliminary parachute, deploys to the task is to reduce velocity significantly, and the main parachute deploys at an altitude of less than 2.5 kilometers. Ravi Margasayam, is it your understanding that this entire process is fully automated? That once the rocket blasts off today, it does its job, and we'll know if it's successful or not subsequently.
Yes, it has to be autonomous because we are talking about milliseconds of firing rockets to separate this CM and CES, the crew module and the crew escape system, and that cannot be done by any human. It will take you can go into error modes. Basically, it will be too late by the time you make a decision. So that's why we give the decision to the computer. And there are a set of computers, like on the shuttle, we have 7 computers, and there is a main computer, and there are 3 support computers on either side. everybody has to agree with the final decision. In the end, the main computer says, okay, let's shut the whole system off, and that's it. We shut the whole system off, or we abort, something like that. So it is very important for us. One thing I want to stress on is, in the case of this innovation, what we are trying to do is we are mapping the unknown here, because Mr. Pallava Bagla mentioned that this is a new rocket. New rocket doesn't have any precedence with old systems. And when you have that, you always have to find some errors. And that's why, remember, when you go through a maze, what happens is you go left and then you come to a dead end. Immediately you turn right. What are you doing? You are mapping the maze. So mapping the unknown. So the faster you fail, faster you understand, you map the maze earlier and come up with the solutions.
Yeah.
And you would rather come up with the solutions now than having humans in the rocket.
Yeah, yeah. Pallav, one of the things that we did quite successfully using a sledge on the ground was test the effectiveness of the chutes. Where did we do that? Do you remember offhand? And
I remember, yes. See, this is a facility which is there in Chandigarh.
Is it a new facility?
It's a facility which was created by the Defense Research and Development Organization at the Terminal Ballistics Laboratory.
Right.
And they have a very long rail where they fire the rocket and then they slow it down with these chutes. So the drogue chutes were tested there. And essentially drogues are to stabilize the free fall which is happening of the crew module, and then the drogue separate, and then your big main parachutes are tested out. The big parachutes have also been tested using helicopters.
That's right, yeah.
By the Defense Research and Development Organization. Remember, Gaganyaan is a national effort.
Yeah.
ISRO is just one part of it. ISRO may be the lead, but DRDO, NAL, HAL,
component
Indian
manufacturers.
Air Force. No, not they are all integral part. Integral part. It's a national mission.
Yeah.
In fact, that is what has been highlighted repeatedly. Unlike Chandrayaan or Mangalyaan, which was led by ISRO, Gaganyaan is a national mission costing 9,000 crores, the single most expensive scientific experiment ever to be done domestically by India. So it's a big leap, and the parachutes have been done by the Defense Research and Development Organization because they have the best expertise on that.
Yeah.
And a lab in Kanpur which has developed the parachutes, tested in Chandigarh, also tested on helicopters. Hopefully everything will work right, and we should see the recovery of the spent crew module soon. We've done one experiment earlier of the crew module recovery, which was done several years ago on the first launch of then what was called the geosynchronous satellite launch vehicle Mark III.
Yeah. And it did float quite
experiment.
well.
Yes, it did well. We did even
that was smaller than this, right?
No, that was of the same size.
I see.
Of the same size, but it didn't go to orbit. It was less than the orbit. We also did a simulated crew module recovery from the orbit. That was also done once. So ISRO has done some testing earlier. They are well prepared for this test today.
Yeah, and just again for the benefit of our viewers, there's an Indian Navy ship, very, very skilled and specifically trained divers who would actually be part of the process of recovering the crew module once it does actually get down into the Bay of Bengal. They will have an incredibly important role to play when we have a crewed flight which actually takes place. They would recover our astronauts once they get back to Earth. So that's also an important part of the training.
Absolutely. The Indian Navy is an integral part of this mission. So even though it's a space mission, the Indian Navy is very much part of it. They've trained hard to recover the crew module. In the final test, the crew module could land in the Arabian Sea or in the Bay of Bengal. So they will have to be prepared for more than one location for the final crew testing. Not today. Today it will land about 10 kilometers into the Bay of Bengal, but when humans are in the loop, it could well be off the coast of Gujarat where the landing will happen, and the alternate location could be the Bay of Bengal. So the Indian Navy would be required to be alert in more than one place when the final missions happen. It's still far away, but
Pallav, so this goes into orbit, right?
no,
it doesn't.
No. Today's test is a suborbital mission because you are testing in the ascent phase when it's still in the atmosphere. Like Dr. Ravi said, those are the very critical seconds where the loads on the rocket are very high.
Yeah.
So they are testing in the transonic condition where Mach 1.2 and then the crew escape system is triggered.
Yeah.
This is a very critical phase and it's not in orbit, it's suborbital. So the temperatures which would be there on the crew module when it is returning back towards the ocean will not go that high.
Yeah.
But then we also have to do that. There will be 2 missions which are 100% simulated missions, exactly of the same nature, where humans would be in the loop only, and if they succeed 100%, only then the crew will be allowed to board the launch vehicle Mark III for the first Gaganyaan flight.
Right. All right, so there's a lot to still be discussed. We're going to take a short break. Pallav has actually been speaking to some of the key scientists and engineers involved in the Gaganyaan mission, and certainly closely involved with this test flight as well. So very special interview coming up. And since I haven't told you as yet, I may as well tell you that 32 minutes from now is when we expect this particular rocket to blast off. 8 to 9 minutes, that's all it is. And we'll know sooner than later whether it's been successful. We'll be cutting across to live footage from Mission Control Center in Sriharikota. Stay tuned, there's a lot more coming up.
Can you describe in a couple of minutes what would be the mission when we have humans in the loop? You have trained astronauts reaching Sriharikota, and how do they get into the launch vehicle, what happens next, and then what happens in orbit, and then deorbit and bring that. If you can explain in your words, that'd be nice.
No, these things are getting evolved and addressed, but then a few days before the launch, they have to be there in the launch center, and they will be having their own place where to stay. Must be an isolated place because they have to be protected from biological germs and other things. They should not get cold or fever. That much precaution should be there, and then they will be having their own medical checkups periodically and all. Or these are all getting worked out, and then they have to go on the day of launch, maybe 1 or 1.5 hours before the launch. Get into that timing also. It is
sure. This evolving.
It is getting evolved, and they get in, and once it is closed, and then they take the position. Then the vehicle is ready for takeoff, and then the escape system will be activated at suitable time so that anything goes. They don't have time to open all the door and come out. So in that case, that is the situation of pad abort. I said anything goes wrong, because we always prepare for the worst. Ideally, everything should go nominally, and then they go to space, and then when you reach space, you feel this weightlessness, or that is the first thing. And then they are assigned with some task. They will finish the task, and then get ready for deorbiting, and then come back and splash down. So in a nominal case, everything is as we are planning. And in case of contingency, there are contingency plans, and then accordingly that also will be addressed.
And we are looking for a splashdown in the Arabian Sea, I believe?
Yeah, somewhere near the
East, near the west coast.
Yeah, Shar, that coast.
Oh, you are looking in Bay of Bengal. Bay of Bengal splashdown.
Again, it depends. We can have primary, we can have secondary. So the primary could be Bay of Bengal. Even we can come to, in case we find that the sea is slightly rough there, we can always plan from orbit to come to the other side.
Welcome back. It is a mission that all of India, I think, people around the world would interested in science would be looking at very, very closely. The Gaganyaan mission, it is India's crewed mission to space. I have been waiting for years to see the development of this program, and we are at a stage now when we know that it is going to happen. It's going to take some time, but today is an important day ahead of the eventual launch, which will take place, if everything goes well, in 2024, at the end of 2024, perhaps in 2025. The test today involves a test of the crew escape system, which is going to separate from a test rocket at a particular altitude to carry the crew module down to the Bay of Bengal. It's a short flight. It'll blast off at 8 a.m. and about 9 minutes later, we hope to see the retrieval of the crew escape module in the Indian Ocean after it's slowed down by parachutes as it makes its final descent into the Bay of Bengal. It'll be recovered by the Indian Navy and their sailors, their divers, I should say. Joining us once again, Ravi Marksayam. He's a NASA scientist. He's been very closely involved with the space shuttle missions, and one of the key points that he was mentioning is that he was one of the key personnel in NASA who's put 700 odd astronauts into space. So he knows a thing or two about space flight. But today is a genuinely exciting day. Could you tell us a little bit about the crew module itself? Is it as big or as small as, let us say, Soyuz modules? How do you look at the design of the crew module, which will have 3 Indians in it when this is all tested and the final mission happens?
Yeah, I guess again it's a question of this is a particular test, and we want to use the real hardware which we'll be using for real launch. So always you test the right hardware which will be going into the launch, because structural engineering is a very critical field, and we don't fully understand all the aspects of the forces, the materials, how we mold the materials, how we shape them, what kind of forces we have, not only static forces but dynamic forces. So all these contribute to your understanding of the failures or potential failures. So what we are trying to do is, by testing these things structurally, vibroacoustically, this is I would call this a real life test. Sometimes some big bridges, some rockets, we cannot test them in your lab. How do you simulate 190 decibels of sound or 100 G's instantaneous loads? So it's very important for us to do the real flight test and understand. And that's what we are trying to do here. The module itself has to be structurally right, because that's the same module will be used again and again. And, they are very similar modules. It's similar to what Soyuz or, Apollo days we had. And, we have 3 people in there typically. And it just provides with the more technological innovations right now compared to the old modules.
Okay. Mr. Marksayam, we've got some breaking news coming in. The launch has been deferred to 8:30 a.m. So it's a delay of half an hour. ISRO officials citing weather reasons. It's been drizzling over Sriharikota. That's not something that affects the launch, but I think the recovery is what because it's a test flight, they want optimal conditions. The sea state would possibly be a bit of a concern. So that's what we look out for. 8:30 is when the test is now rescheduled for. Let's hope that weather doesn't play any more of a factor. But if it does, it will. I mean, these things happen all the time. But at the moment, 8:30 a.m. We're going to come back to Mr. Marksayam later on today as well. But we've got a couple of more interviews done by Pallav with key officials who are involved, engineers and scientists, ISRO officials involved in the test itself. So, as we go back to my colleague Aarti for a quick look at some of the big news stories across the country, a couple of key points. Number one, ISRO has deferred the test of the Gaganyaan test vehicle, TVD-1 as it is known. Half an hour only, don't worry. From 8 to 8:30, it's been drizzling slightly at Sriharikota. As I mentioned, that doesn't affect the blast off itself. But what we are looking at is the retrieval of the crew escape module, right, in the Bay of Bengal. So the sea state, waves, etc., that's a bit of a concern. So hopefully that will not be too much of a concern. We will know one way or the other soon enough. But for the moment, a quick look at this interview, a little bit of news, and when we can, we will get back with the very latest on this important Gaganyaan test mission.
Now we go to a mission. That is, the first mission is demonstrating the crew escape system during flight. So we had done a pad abort test a few years back, but now the most important thing in Gaganyaan is the safety of the crew. So we should ensure that at any stage during ascent phase, if anything, unfortunately, if anything goes wrong with the vehicle, the safety of the crew is very important. For that, there is a crew safety or crew escape system, different stages. So this crew escape system, which is operating during the first stage of the vehicle when the S-200, two solid strap-ons are firing, so that has to work at different conditions. One is at launch pad, secondly during the ascent phase, like there are certain critical events like the transonic condition when the rocket speed is crossing from subsonic to supersonic or a high dynamic pressure region. So there are identified zones at which if we activate the escape system, how the escape system is going to behave and what are the physiological levels experienced by the crew module. Of course it is unmanned, but then we can measure and see. So the immediate test what we are going to do, we have a device that test vehicle which is derived from the strap-on, liquid strap-on of GSLV. It's a single stage vehicle, liquid stage, and then over the test vehicle we fix the crew escape system. Crew escape system is basically an assemblage of quick acting solid motors, and inside that the crew module will be there, and the test vehicle will take the crew escape system to the required condition. Here we are going to do at a transonic condition, that is Mach numbers close to 1.2, and at that time vehicle will be the escape system will be activated, and the crew module will be taken away from the vehicle, and then you release the crew module, a parachute will be deployed, and then it will splash down and then we collect it back. So basically it is demonstrating transonic condition, the in-flight demonstration of the crew escape system.